Republican Senator Lindsey Graham calling the rocket attacks an act of war. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying this, tweeting a short time ago, closely monitoring the situation following bombings targeting U.S. troops in Iraq. We must ensure the safety of our service members, including ending needless provocations from the administration and demanding that Iran cease its violence. America and world cannot afford war. Joining us live to discuss the very latest, including what tonight's strikes mean for the maximum pressure campaign, Democratic Congressman John Garamendi. He serves on the House Armed Services Committee, and Senate Republican Conference Chairman John Barrasso of Wyoming. Gentlemen, good to have both of you with us tonight.
Thanks, Shannon.
Good to be with you.
Senator, I'll start with you. What do you make of the Speaker's assessment that this is essentially, these are needless provocations from the administration? Those are her words.
Well, I think she's wrong. The provocations have been coming from Iran. They have been at war with us for 40 years. This was a continued escalation. It were the continued escalations over the last number of months, with 11 attacks in the last 2 months and an attack on our embassy that brought about the death of Soleimani, which I thought was great patience by the president to hold back, but he had to act. He said he would, and he did. Tonight, Iran escalated again. The difference this time is that the missiles actually came from within Iran.
And Congressman, tomorrow, both of you on either side of the Hill will get briefings tomorrow to get a full assessment, and I'm sure this will now be added into the mix, what's happened tonight. In the meantime, there have been those who have raised questions about whether or not there was an imminent threat, whether this administration has been untruthful about that. And it's caused a lot of consternation from people who say you shouldn't be questioning the president at a moment like this. Marco Rubio tweeting this: Iran now openly calling for Americans to turn on each other. The time will come to debate U.S. policy, but tonight, American and allied troops have come under direct attack by a nation state, and Americans must come together to support and protect them and respond appropriately. So what do you make of the debate that seems to be cutting in many ways along partisan lines?
Well, it wouldn't be a surprise to find the partisan divide on this particular issue. Certainly, the initial killing of Soleimani was a question of was it an imminent threat or not. That has to do with the legality of the attack. At this point, it's an interesting question, but so what? So where does that lead us? The counterattack, or the retaliation now by Iran, and their follow-up message from the foreign minister is extremely important. And it appears as though they want a de-escalation. We just heard from Esper that he used the word de-escalation. Those are my two favorite words this day, de-escalate. And let's set this, let's take a deep breath here. Let's take a look at what's going on. One more thing that's very, very much on my mind is that the next step, if the United States were to take one, really is entering into a war, and that brings us to the work that the Senator and I must do, and that is an authorization to go to war.
Yeah, Senator, at one point, do you think that that is legally necessary?
Well, we routinely debate authorization of the use of military force. The president has done what I think has been completely legal and appropriate. He has been protecting American lives, our embassies, our personnel. We have been attacked tonight. I think he has all the authority that he needs to respond to what happened today. So I support the president's actions. And to me, this goes back, we talk about what the partisan divide is. That has begun with the Iranian deal, which was such a bad deal, which gave so much money to Iran in the past. Much of it was used for terrorism. And I believe some of those missiles that were fired at us tonight were funded by money that came from the United States as the Iranian deal was put together, which was really an approach by the Obama administration of wishful thinking rather than real strategy.
Well, and Congressman, you know that is going to be one of the criticisms of the deal, that there were a lot of unmarked bills that went over to Iran, and we know they've had a lot of inappropriate activities, a lot of proxies, the support of terror groups, those kinds of things. What do you say to that? That they could now be enabled to be funded to have these kinds of materials and have this kind of if you want to call it arrogance or confidence about coming after the U.S.?
Well, coming after the U.S. is never a good thing for anybody to do, and certainly not for Iran or any other country. There are real consequences in doing so. My point earlier had to do with the fact that now we're not necessarily protecting ourselves from an imminent attack, but rather responding, retaliating. And at that point, that comes then to, is it proper, in my view it is, for Congress to take this up as a war and the authorization for the president to then respond, to retaliate Certainly the president, any president, has the right, in fact, the obligation to protect American troops and American lives from an imminent, taking us back to your opening question, what is imminent? At this point, it's a tit for tat, a retaliation. Now, if there's evidence that another missile attack is about to happen, then that then comes to the question of imminent. But if it's more than that, then we are really entering into a war, and that requires us, the Senate and the House, to take the issue up and say yes or no, America will or will not go to war.
Well, and hopefully both of your questions will be answered more fully after these briefings tomorrow with all the heavy hitters who will be there. Quickly, since I have you both, I want to ask you about impeachment. Speaker Pelosi today, still holding on to the articles. They haven't been sent over to the Senate, said this in a letter to her Democratic colleagues. Leader McConnell has made clear that his loyalty is to the president and not to the Constitution. Senator, she's not convinced that this is going to be handled properly on the Senate side.
This is purely partisan on her part, purely political. The Democrats have been obsessed with impeachment. The national mood is turning against her. I will just show you this. 58% of Americans say send the articles. 58%, 77%. Accept the Clinton rules. What was used for the Clinton impeachment 20 years ago, it's time to do the same thing. That's Senator, what we now have. 51 Republican senators in the United States Senate have said they are ready to vote to that.
Okay,
I don't mind you putting that up, but don't put it up in front of me.
Yeah, don't block his face. All right, let me ask you something, Congressman. This is from Mark Thiessen. His headline is Nancy Pelosi has no leverage. The sound you hear is Mitch McConnell's laughter. This is an opinion piece in the Washington Post. Democrats claim they're delaying in the name of, quote, fairness. But what is really unfair is to accuse the president of high crimes and misdemeanors and then deny him a trial in which he can clear his name. Congressman, you know the argument that we heard repeatedly before Christmas was we have to get this done. The president is an urgent threat to democracy right now, and now we're on hold.
I don't think it was the question of an urgent threat to democracy, but yes, we wanted to move expeditiously in the House of Representatives, and we did. We also knew that the subpoenas that we had issued were in the court process and were not going to be done and through the Supreme Court all the way in any time soon, quite possibly even during the first-year term of this president. And so therefore we moved forward without, in my view, critical testimony. Now, I think the Senate has a different situation, one in which they are conducting a trial, and most every trial I've ever heard of has had testimony provided during that trial. Now, keep in mind, this is a different situation than the Clinton, where there was an investigation conducted by an independent investigator for more than, I think, 2 years, if I remember correctly. And then that information was brought forward. And even so, they did have witnesses, depositions, and televised witnesses.
Well, this was so expedited in the House, there was no time for that.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get the question.
Just saying it was so expedited in the House, there wasn't time to build out that record as you could have sent over to the Senate.
Well, as I said a moment ago, we were stonewalled. The president said absolutely no one was going to testify and no one was going to respond to the subpoenas. Those were the words coming from the president and the White House. We had no option but to go with what we had. Would we love to have had these other witnesses? Yes, but they were not available.
Yeah, and we know court battles, as we all know, take forever around here. So
they rushed it through the House. They wanted to get it done by the end of the year and get it to the Senate.
All right, gentlemen,
there you go.
We appreciate both of you coming. It's always good to have a bipartisan discussion on these important nights. So thank you both. We appreciate it.